Hi, welcome back. By the time you get to this class, this is Chem 1804, you'll have probably completed 1802 and joined Dr. Alaban and myself, Dr. Hathcock, for many of our experiments on our YouTube channel. Today we are going to, by the way, I feel like I'm in a fishbowl. Anyway, we are going to do synthesis of biodiesel. So this is one of my favorite labs to do. It's a transesterification, big word to work with here, transesterification of vegetable oil. And so basically we're going to use a catalyst to produce biodiesel from plain old vegetable oil. Now, in your kit, you should have seen a small package, and within this package you will have received a thermometer, but our thermometer came unfortunately malfunctioning, so I am going to be using a different thermometer that we have in our laboratory. So in your biodiesel packet you will receive a small container of methanol. You'll also have your calcium hydroxide. You will have a glass dram. It's a vial. Okay, and you will also have generic vegetable oil. Now, to share a little bit about the biodiesel production, it is well known that different oils will produce different types of biodiesel. And so if you want to take it upon yourself and you have any methanol left over and you have any of your hydroxide, your calcium hydroxide left over, you can actually perform this experiment again using some different types of oils. Soybean oil, walnut oil, depends on what you have in your house. Anyhow, so in addition to that, you will actually need a glass test tube. You cannot use the plastic ones in this experiment because unfortunately you will have a chemical reaction with that plastic. Now, outside of that kit here, in the general kit, you will be using a 10 mil graduated cylinder to measure out your methanol. You will also need your scale. You will need to actually pull out a weigh boat, even though your experiment does not tell you to do so. You will need to provide purified drinking water. Most of the experiments that you've worked with, by the time you get to this class, you will need to have drinking water purified on hand. And because this may or may not cause a mess, you will have to have some paper towels on hand as well. And then of course you will need your calculator and a writing utensil. Now I'm going to tell you up front that this particular experiment actually takes 2 days plus 60 minutes to complete, so make sure that you set up enough time, because before we can move forward with the second half of this activity, you will need to prep for 2 days. So we're actually going to set up the beginning of the esterification, and it only takes about 10 minutes to actually start the beginning process. Oh, one thing I did forget is in this packet you will actually have some pH paper, but this will actually come at a later point in time. And this is your broad spectrum pH scale, which will measure one of the tests that you're going to cover later on. So you can actually put that aside until later. We don't want to contaminate our pH paper, so we'll put that over here. Now, in the essence of time, and to make sure you understand everything that we're going to do, I want to make sure everybody is clear on a transesterification. You should read your background. But basically, you're going to be exchanging an organic ester group, okay, between or with an alcohol group between your two molecules. And one of the things that you need to be aware of, and you should have watched some videos prior to starting this lab that talks about what biodiesel is and the differences between using just generic vegetable oil and the true essence of what biodiesel is. Because you can go out to Burger King, McDonald's and collect the used vegetable oil or peanut oil that they're using in the fast food restaurants and recycle it, because basically that was the premise behind biodiesel when the process was first developed. But you run into some issues, and one of them is you need to filtrate that used vegetable oil, because you have food particles, you have contaminants, and so one of the potential contaminants that arises are free fatty acids. And so in the process of completing activities 1, activity 2, you're going to test for complete transesterification. That's a big word. It's like smelting. Anyhow, and then you'll also test for the quality of the biodiesel. And so in the end, you end up testing for approximately 4 different things. You'll test for pH, you'll test for density, you'll test for triglycerides. I'm sure we've all heard of triglycerides. And then you will also test for unreacted triglycerides, and that is one of the things that we're testing for in terms of quality. And we often talk about perfect labs that we think that students often think that teachers expect perfect labs to occur, and that doesn't always happen. And so that's one of the things that you're going to look at to see whether or not the lab completely or went to complete formation of your transesterification. So the final test is quality and the presence of unreacted triglycerides. Okay, so one of the things that I did before we started the video here was, in the instructions, you're weighing out in your calcium hydroxide approximately 0.02 grams, okay? And I used one of the weigh boats that was in the general kit, and I went ahead and turned on my scale, and I went ahead and tared it out. So you lay it on there, zeroed it out, and I pre-weighed 0.02, and I've already put it in my glass vial here, okay? So once I have that all taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and move that aside. I also went ahead and measured out my 8 mils of my methanol, just for saving time. I want to remind all of you, when you're measuring out, you need to look at the meniscus, because we measure from the bottom. Okay, so to set this up for my 48-hour process, I'm going to go ahead and add my 8 mils directly to my vial. Okay, and I'm going to cap it and shake vigorously. Okay, now remember, you're working with an alcohol here, which means it's volatile. And what do we know about items that are volatile? They tend to build up pressure. So make sure that when you take the cap off, you don't do it directly near your face. Okay? Okay, I release the pressure. Just like anything, we are supposed to rinse. Now I'm right near a sink here. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and rinse out. I graduated cylinder because I'm going to need to put 1 ml of vegetable oil. Now, my husband and I used to actually make biodiesel on our farms. We made them in large quantities, though. So this is why I kind of like doing this experiment. Now, one of the problems that you could possibly run into when making biodiesel is you could end up making soap rather than the actual biodiesel. And let me tell you, It happens. Okay. All right, let's see. So when you aren't sure, what's wrong one? Can't tell if those are the two. Lost track of what I was working with. So I'm not quite to the one, and I don't want to overfill when our droppers come in. Okay. All right, set it aside. Now we're going to add my 1 mil directly to my dram. Kind of a funny name to call a glass vial, but okay. Oil and water. We know that one's polar and non-polar, which is the point of our calcium hydroxide. Okay, so for the next 48 hours, we'll shake this occasionally and we'll let the process begin. In 48 hours, we'll come back and we'll see whether or not we converted our vegetable oil to biodiesel. Stay tuned.